Good morning. My name is Chief Baldari. I'm not an animal advocate, but I have particular experience which provides some qualification. I served the United States Army for 21 years, during which time I have seen frontline and behind-the-line combat in Iraq, Sarajevo, and the Baltic Theater. During my time, I have witnessed firsthand the moral degradation of the human psyche in both war and out. I believe that the rampant abuse of non-human animals has a direct impact on the moral integrity and therefore the good of the human race. Therefore, the good of the human race, and for the good of the human race, non-human animals should be treated with dignity and respect. I currently teach military ethics for the United States Army. I studied ethical theory at the university level and was selected as a doctoral candidate at the Interdisciplinary Ethics Applied Center for Excellence, where I do research on virtue theory. In this paper, I intend to deny the morality of the behavior known as bestiality, or the use of non-human animals for sexual gratification by human beings. While many do not see this as an open question, it should be our nature to occasionally question long-standing traditional morals in the hopes of disbanding superstition and irrelevance. I will argue against bestiality as a socially acceptable practice based on 5 standard premises. The standard premises are instrumentality, consent, disease transmission, deviance, and morality. I will ignore any religious concerns, either surrounding morality or freedom of practice, instead focusing on the philosophical moral identity of the individual and of society as a whole. So that there's no misunderstanding, I would like to review a few common terms. Instrumentality is the strict concept of purpose towards some specific end. It is not general usefulness, but instead the value of particular action toward the achieving of some desirable end goal, with no necessarily inherent value alone. The end goal must further have some value in and of itself. For the purposes of this work, I will choose the highest moral identity of humankind as a goal, known in philosophy as the good. The definition of the good is an open question, but it is easily conceptualized and can be communicated using examples and concepts. In fact, it is this ability to conceptualize and understand the desirability of the good that makes it a worthy goal. Evil is in the strictly philosophical sense, is that which works in opposition of the good. All other actions are immoral. Rape is defined as the use of force, whether through physical violence, the threat of violence, coercion, or deception, for sexual gratification and control. Rape is a physical and cognitive torture. I will use the term beast throughout this work to denote any non-human animal. This is purely used to distinguish humans from non-humans and does not carry any additional connotation beyond those presented here. Deviance is the sociological phenomenon in which a particular behavior is different from the societal norm. I will use it more specifically as driven by some psychological deficiency, especially mental illness. I will discuss this more later, but it is important to note that deviance is not necessarily evil or even undesirable in the right circumstances. The most important term for this work will be moral identity. Human beings are distinctly moral creatures. For my purpose, allow it to mean that intuition, whether inculcated by society or instinctual, that allows human beings to function well with other human beings in a way that identifies with and provides for the greater good. Premise 1, instrumentality. The first premise against bestiality is that there is no instrumental purpose in having sex with animals. There is simply no justifiable, rational reason that bestiality is preferable to any other action that achieves the same end. It serves no biological, physical, or emotional purpose. There is nothing to be gained biologically since there can be no positive genetic interaction. Physical gratification can be obtained by less deviant means. Even emotional connection is unusual since the lack of understanding to fully define the emotional states of beasts. Since we lack the emotional understanding to fully define the emotional states of beasts. While we can see emotional behaviors in animals, the arrogance of thinking that we can read their phenomenological experiential state is beyond human presumption. If one believes it improves their own emotional connection with the animal, then they are acting in pure selfishness, without regard to the morality of the action. In effect, there is nothing to be gained through human-beast sexual interaction that cannot be obtained more efficiently from some other means. In addition to having no positive effect, there is a direct negative effect. These acts do not provide for the good of the individual or the greater good of society. Bestiality destroys the moral integrity of the individual and the society to which that individual belongs. Finally, bestiality does not bring into effect any rights of the animal. A human being that can so freely disregard the sexual rights of animals is on a slippery slope towards disregarding any of the rights of an animal. The slope can uncontrollably lead to a climate of denial of rights in general. I want to provide a brief construction of consent, which is premise 2. What I will show is that when one does not have sex with consent, one is acting evilly. The concept of consent to any sexual encounter is central to the moral definition of sexual conduct. Even in sexually open societies, rape is continuously defined as sexual conduct that lacks the consent of one or more parties. Bestiality is rape. We judge consent to occur in a case where all involved parties are interested in sexual contact with all other parties involved, at the time when it occurs and under the full power of their cognitive awareness and rational judgment. If at any point one of these puzzle pieces is missing, then consent cannot be assumed. The most analogous case in regards to statutory, the most analogous case is in regard to statutory rape or sexual relations with a child. In even the most seemingly benign of circumstances, the verbal consent of the parties, a time and place deemed suitable to the activities, a mutual feeling of love or desire on all sides, etc., it is well understood that it is legally and morally wrong to have sex with a child. The child is simply incapable of making the decision to commit with reasonable understanding of the consequences. Furthermore, civilized society finds child rape to be despicable. Because of these reasons, it is considered criminal and dastardly to attempt this action with a child. In short, it is an evil action. Rape, using the most pure definition, is torture. It is an exercise of control of the victim. The physical and emotional trauma is evident and debilitating. Virtuous persons readily agree that there is never a moral justification for rape. It serves no instrumental purpose. The damage done to the one being raped, along with the moral degradation of the rapist, provides no route to rationalization. Denying the evilness of rape is to mount an attack on the very things that make us morally capable at all. The thread of arguments for bestiality commonly argue that the animal does not suffer in the act. While I have my doubts on this opinion, it's irrelevant. Animals cannot grant consent in the same way that a child cannot grant consent. They simply lack the humanly understandable rational capability to interact on that emotional level. Frankly, by engaging in sexual activity with a non-consenting entity, the perpetrator is engaging in the aggravated torture of another living thing for no good reason. It is an exercise in power and deviance born from some level of desperation or disease. To torture another living thing, no matter what your socially moral belief system is evil. The damage one does to one's identity through committing evil acts is exactly what defines one as good or bad. This alone is reason enough to abstain from sex with animals. Premise 3, disease. Presumed fact, human immunodeficiency virus is directly linked to simian immunodeficiency virus, granting a scientifically reasonable link to the theory that AIDS was introduced to human beings through sexual contact between humans and great apes. There may be many more diseases that were contracted through bestiality, but this single case is sufficient evidence to prove that at least one human epidemic is a result of bestiality. The mere possibility that a human being could contract an otherwise unknown illness through an illicit affair should be grounds for classification of bestiality as an immoral act. Even in the most controlled environment, the fact that these diseases are often unknown prior to contraction makes them impossible to test for. Even if one is deviant enough to not consider bestiality a moral dilemma, then at the very least, for the good health of humankind, it should be illegal. The slightest possibility of unleashing an epidemic on humanity should be reason enough. Premise 4, deviance. Human beings are prone to particulars of behavior. While we know very little of why we have the behaviors that we do know that there are activities that significantly deviate from statistical norms. I will discuss 2 types of deviance, each of which can be either benign or malignant. Natural deviance is particulars in health or disposition born from a unique aspect of a person's genetic makeup or body chemistry. Conditioned deviance is born from inculcation, training, or choice. There are deviances that and are healthy for humankind, or at least cause no harm, such as ambidexterity. There are other deviances that occur naturally in the same way that cystic fibrosis occurs naturally, which are most certainly not for the betterment of the organism. A condition deviance might include such things as acquired tastes, cultural predispositions, or belief in religion. For this work, I will be focusing on psychological, sexual deviance, or brain chemistry or altered behavior states having to do with the drives that involve the mental and physical pleasures associated with the procreative process. An example of a benign deviation might be a foot fetish, which is relatively harmless, while malignant deviation might be sadism, which by definition causes harm. Regardless of the source of the deviation, its moral value is based on the behavior. Acquired tastes or genetic predispositions are not wrong unless they inspire behaviors that are wrong. There is also a dilemma regarding whether one who is born with a genetic deviation attempts to pass that deviation on to those who are not predisposed. For example, we may see no harm in foot fetishes, but if a teacher was training the children in his high school to be a foot fetishist, we would be concerned. Bestiality is a malignant deviation. It can be either natural or conditioned, but never has positive moral value. The danger of tolerating or promoting these deviant actions is setting a precedent that could lead to unforeseen dire consequences. Much like how we wouldn't want to encourage a phobia of spiders, we should not allow the promotion of bestiality. I foresee significant resistance to these statements when taken out of context. Human sexual deviance, whether benign or malignant, is diverse. It is important to remember that so long as these deviations promote the happiness of those involved, all of those involved, then the moral implications are benign, or at least amoral. A homosexual relationship, while not a societal one, has no negative consequence. Voyeurism, so long as it is in the confines of an appropriate establishment, is benign, but peeking into a person's window is evil. Premise 5, moral identity. Finally, I would like to address the morality within these contexts. Morals exist as human constructs. While a few morals are dogmatic, most are perfectly rational rules for dealing with others. They are rules of conduct to ensure the good order, discipline, and social awareness of everyone in a social context. The rule against bestiality is a good example of a moral law that is entirely divorced from dogma. Morality is not law, but lawmakers are moral agents and use morality to create legislation. During the research for this work, I encountered a number of attempts to defend bestiality. I will reply to a few of those arguments here. The most common counter to the consent argument is that no beast necessarily consents to death, yet we still allow the killing of animals by humans. They therefore conclude that the moral degradation of humankind is already assured, and that by proxy we should allow bestiality based on the fact that we've already provided this freedom. I agree that human beings kill beasts for any myriad of reasons, to include pleasure, with little concern for the moral consequences. Beasts are often treated poorly, tortured, and put to death for reasons ranging from pure survival to mere inconvenience. I do not deny that the killing of a beast for absolutely no reason is an evil act. In fact, I would consent to a number of arguments for the rights of beasts. But it is understandable why humans keep cattle for consumption. It is very easy for morally guided human beings to want to end this practice, but it is not impossible to see why it started. I see very little resistance by animal lovers to owning pets, but if all human rights are extended to beasts, would this activity be slavery? Possibly, but it is socially acceptable, selfishly indulgent, and causes little harm. So many pet owners feel no moral compulsion to end this practice. I have two caveats to this idea. The first is that there are otherwise fully moral agents that cause great harm to their pets for the purposes of beauty or utility, poodles and horses and more. Unfortunately, it is all too common for humans to do that to themselves and their own children as well, making this a problem that must be addressed broadly. Also, there are certain cases where pet owners have caused great harm, but not strictly because they are pet owners, but because they are abusers and degenerates, not who happen to own pets. Caveats aside, the issue is that killing and ownership have less moral apprehensibility because the act can be possibly justified. Rape, no matter what the circumstances, is never justified. Rape cannot ever serve a positive purpose, and if ever someone tries to justify rape, the individual is so morally bankrupt at the core that they cannot see the evil in the action. 1,000 deaths do not equal, qualitatively, a single act of rape. Therefore, the claim that allowing the killing of beasts sets precedent for allowing the sexual abuse of beasts is groundless. The second claim is that of the conscientious zoo. This is the one who chooses only beasts and circumstances that fit certain criteria. For instance, the beast is of an appropriate size and be free from harm. It seems to take pleasure and even be excited by the act. Acts are conducted under the strictest privacy. The individual uses careful prophylactics to stave off the possibility of disease, or chooses to maintain a monogamous relationship with the beast, etc. At first glance, this seems to be very convincing. Unfortunately for the zoophiliac, the dilemma still exists. One could use all of these conditions perfectly, transposing the word beast with child. If this does not make a rational agent's stomach turn, then I have no argument that will convince him otherwise. Also assuming the correct and healthy amount of human moral intuition, the zoophiliac will always know that they are deviant. Psychological damage is significant. If moral intuition is lacking, then the problem isn't that the person is a good zoophiliac, but that they are a bad person. In conclusion, I can dismiss bestiality as an act of an insane evil instinct for the selfish and evil purposes. It serves no end other than to further the immoral aspirations and achieve sexual gratification through the exercise of power over beasts. The damage done is greater than any possible individual benefit and never serves the better well-being of the animal, the perpetrator, or society. Thank you.